Well, hello everybody. I'm Michael Parsons from Accor Live Limitless, and wherever you might be watching today, I hope you're ready for a great and special content piece for our all-at-home session. But before we get started, I just want to do a quick technical check. If you could give me a thumbs up or just drop me a quick comment, just so I know that the audio is all okay for you. We'll get started in just a few seconds' time. Thanks so much. Well, thanks guys. I can see plenty of thumbs up, so it sounds like the audio is all okay. So thanks so much for joining us today for this live session. I'm going to be joined in just a couple of minutes by a very special guest, in former Australian professional tennis player Sam Groth. We're going to have a really interesting conversation today. We're going to talk a little bit with Sam about what he's been up to during these unprecedented times. We're going to talk, of course, about tennis, what inspired Sam to get into tennis, some great memories that he had whilst he was on tour. We're going to talk about some rivalries as well. We're going to talk to Sam about some of those players he loved to play against and some of those players he feared. I also want to talk to Sam a little bit about life after tennis, what he's been up to, and also talk to him about what the future might hold and some of the passions that Sam has. So today is another session, thanks to All at Home. We are creating these unique digital experiences exclusively for our all members and our subscribers to the page. And we want to make sure that we try and craft unique experiences that you can enjoy from the comfort of your own home, whether that's live or recorded. So I do hope you enjoy this session. Please make sure that you do check out our page. We've already got some great content recorded that you can go back and see. And of course, in the coming days and weeks ahead, we've also got some great content and guests coming up. So, without further ado, let's get our very special guest online. Let me connect in with Mr. Sam Groth. Let's see if this magic works.
Michael.
Hey, Sam, how are you? I'm just waiting for your picture to come up, but I can hear you loud and clear.
Perfect. Hopefully you get me in a second there.
I hope so too. I don't want to be the only one. So listen, mate, thanks so much for joining us. It's great that you could take some time out to have a bit of a chat and hopefully tell us a few great stories. And the guys who have tuned in today can learn more about you, but also a little bit about what inspired you to get into tennis and also what you're up to now. I got to say, it's the second one that I've done now, that our all-at-home session. I was privileged enough to do a session only a week ago with Fox Sports presenter Ed Russell. And I noticed actually one of the guests who insta-bombed my session was actually you. And it inspired me to ask you to see if you want to join me. And again, thanks so much for taking up the challenge. I hope we have a bit of fun today. I'm just going to try and link you back in. It looks like we're just having a couple of technical issues, but hopefully we'll have you on the line.
I lost you for a split second there. I'm back.
Okay, I could
hear everything you were saying. You can't see me. Is that what you're saying?
I can't see you, but I can hear you loud and clear.
It's all right. Let's try to get this video going.
All righty. Whilst we do that, why don't we just jump straight into it? If you can hear me, okay. So
I can hear you. I can hear you perfectly, and it looks like I can see myself, but you can't see me. So
okay. Can anyone else on the call, could they give me a little comment to say, can you guys see Sam?
Okay, they can see us by the looks of it.
Oh, okay. Well, at least they can see you. I can't see you. Probably a good thing, Sam. You'll intimidate me. So look, let's get straight to it. Let's talk about the topic of the time, and that's staying at home. And certainly we've been on a roller coaster and things have changed dramatically in the last couple of months, even since I saw you in Melbourne during the Australian Open. So what have you been doing to stay productive and I guess keep your sanity, your peace of mind during this stay-at-home journey? Let's try again.
It's been it's actually see you. It's been a while since I've seen you. Australian Can you see me now? We good?
Here now, backwards hat, loving it.
Nothing much changed. Look, I was getting a bit nervous, starting to sweat a little bit. Didn't want to
Oh,
upset.
it's all right. Technology is wonderful when it works, and then when it doesn't, Anyway, we're there. Good to see you.
No, you too. I'm actually down at my wife Britt. Her grandmother has a beach house down here, so we're about an hour out of Melbourne at the moment. We popped down here about a week and a half ago. It's been empty since the summer, so we thought we'd just get out of Melbourne. Obviously, not much going on for quite a bit of the last few months, and just to break it up a little bit on the beach. The dogs loved it down here, but I think we'll head back to Melbourne maybe after the weekend. I think it's been nice to have a little bit of a change.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think, I don't know if you heard the first question I asked you about what you're doing to try and keep productive and keep that mental state, that sanity. But I guess, obviously escaping, it sounds like you can do that, which is a fantastic thing. Obviously, that's one way that you've been able to do that.
Yeah, it's been nice. Obviously, it's a tough time, like most people. I don't know, we'll touch on it, but now my work's been very much impacted. Obviously, when you work in tennis, which we're not seeing any of at the moment, and I do a travel show for Channel 9 here in Australia, obviously around restaurants and wineries and cafes and hotels, and that's been a huge industry that's been affected. Obviously, you would know very well, and so all the stuff I work in sort of shut down at the moment. So it's been a time where my wife works in the travel industry as well with advertising through Qantas and. Yeah, it's been a time, I guess, where we could spend a little bit of time together, just sort of, relax down, get a lot of stuff done around the house. That was one of the reasons that I tried to escape down here, convince my wife, Britt, to escape down to the beach so I didn't have to do too many more home renos. I'm not the best with a hammer. She ends up doing most of the hard work. But, a lot of Netflix, a lot of time relaxing, and very lucky now that here in Australia, obviously, restrictions starting to lift a little bit. So I love playing my golf. We got that back about a week or so ago. So I've been spending plenty of time on the golf course as well the last week.
That sounds perfect. Yeah, here in Singapore, we're still under quite heavy restrictions. And hopefully, things will start to ease up over time. But I'm happy to hear that you're able to get out and do some more things in Melbourne and in Australia. And that's great news. It's obviously a positive step forward. And you mentioned, obviously, industries being impacted like yours. Obviously, Brit in hospitality, myself, and others in hotels as well. It's been a really difficult time, but it's the partnerships and the friendships that are really coming through in times like this. And as I said, it's great to be able to have you with us as well, just to sort of talk a little bit about what you're up to and hopefully inspire some people in these dark times and see some light ahead. But so what sort of recommendations could you give the people who are on the chat today about what they could be doing to sort of, I guess, create a bit of excitement when they are at home? Do you have any favorite music you listen to, or do you play an instrument? You mentioned the dogs, and I'll ask you about the dogs in a minute. But what sort of recommendations could you give?
Yeah, definitely not musically talented, I can tell you, Michael. It's not my forte. I don't mind getting in the kitchen, so I've been playing my hand. But when I stopped playing tennis and I came home, actually, I really started enjoying getting in the kitchen and cooking. And I'd experienced so much, or so many different types of cuisine around the world that, I do like to eat very simply. I grew up in the country. I'm a country boy. I'm a meat and three veg, very basic, but just trying to expand my horizons a little bit. But in doing so, not just ordering in, doing that at home. Of course, watched everything possible. Tiger King was the first one when we went into lockdown, like most people. But been The Last Dance, and I guess as a former athlete, watching and seeing that sort of inner sanctum that we're seeing from the Chicago Bulls, what we saw with Michael Jordan and that team, just incredible, the access that they were able to get, and to look back on such an historic era. I bought a bike, so I know you out and doing your triathlons, and I never thought I can't bring myself to wear the Lycra yet, so you won't catch me in Lycra, but I got a bike. Rick got a bike, so we've been going on a few rides, which has been nice. I'm definitely not going to become a cyclist. I don't think there's too many 125 kilo cyclists riding around in the Tour de France, but
you go well on the downhill.
Yes, I can build up some serious speed, that's for sure. But no, that's been something else, something I never had done. Rode a bike when I was a kid, but in terms of getting out and actually going for a ride and exploring Melbourne. So we've been back there about 2.5 years since I retired. I've come up 3 years now. nice to get out and actually explore the city and not drive, go down the bike trails and the paths and see little bits of the city that you probably haven't been able to explore. You see so much of the world from your car, but you don't see very much at all, really.
No, you're right. And I think that I'd say that's the case for a lot of people, exploring those hidden gems that are really around the corner from where you've lived, maybe your whole life, that you've never really seen. And, some of the street art that you come across. I know Melbourne's famous for the laneways. In Singapore as well, we've got some amazing street art on sides of buildings that I never knew existed until this period of time. So it's been nice, definitely, to have that experience. Now, I had to prepare for this interview, and as I said, I did my first one with Ed Russell, a very professional presenter on Fox Sports. And
well, you're not going to get that, so
that's okay. That's okay. What I did find, and research is critically important. So what did I do? I basically stalked your Instagram, and what I found out was there was a couple of things. Right? I don't want you to be scared, but maybe you should.
How far back did you go?
I noticed that you're quite comfortable in jumping into a pool filled with pink balls and needing a flotation device to stay afloat.
Yes. I do anything I'm told. If it's an interesting one, that. I do remember that. That was during the Australian Open at the Garnier tent, I think. I had to jump into trust me, photographers make you do some terrible stuff over the years. I think that's probably one of the better photos. There's been some god-awful ones. I can promise that.
Things suits you, Sam. Moving on. Obviously, you mentioned Brit, and 2017, you guys got engaged in Paris during the French Open, which is just beautiful. And of course, you guys got married in 2018, which was a beautiful ceremony. And I noticed on your page, and you mentioned it actually, that you've got some dogs. So 2 dogs, if I'm not mistaken, both female. A poodle and a lab. Am I close?
They're running around like crazy here somewhere.
Okay. Because I know that would love to see. Can we get a shot of them, or are they just crazy?
Give me 15 seconds. Hold on.
15 seconds.
No, they're coming.
Here they come.
Puppies. Lulu.
Hello.
Lulu. Oh my God. Hang on. The lab's decided to get herself up on the bed. Lulu, come here. Come here. Hang on.
Oh, beautiful.
No, they're chaotic.
Oh, I can imagine. I had 2 dogs.
No compromise. Look, and my wife Brit's here now too. She's not going to want me to turn it around because she's very much in a relaxed state.
This is an all at home chat. We're in our casual gear. I'm in my Roger Federer shirt, of course. But
I did notice that. But the last time we played, Michael, it wasn't very much favourable on your side of the net.
No, it wasn't. But for the viewers who are interested in the score, it was 1-1. I took a game. I returned the serve.
As she walks away.
I'm not Michael.
Hi, Britt. You got cranky, and then I don't think I won another point to 6-1. But I took a game.
Good times.
It was good times. But thanks for showing the dogs. Beautiful, beautiful dogs. Thank you. Now, you mentioned, obviously, restrictions are opening up, which is fantastic. You're obviously down at the parents' house on the beach, which sounds amazing. I wouldn't mind being there myself. But as restrictions ease even further and you can travel maybe interstate or even internationally, is there somewhere you want to go, or somebody you want to see, or you guys want to see?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're very lucky. Obviously, the lifestyle we lived for a long time involved a lot of travel. And even since, I guess, I retired, work for me involved a lot of travel. And, as restrictions ease, I think, when we saw each other in January, caught up during the Australian Open, we thought the bushfires were going to be the worst thing that we'd see this year in Australia. And for many people, obviously it was a traumatic time and still is. And a lot of people are still recovering from that. And on the back of that, we wanted to do a lot more domestic travel as well and go out to sort of regional areas and support the communities that were really affected by those bushfires. And I think now we don't know when we're going to get international travel back. I'd love to get back to Singapore. We had a great time there at the end of last year, and we had plans to go to the South Pacific, and we duck around sort of all over the place when we can. I'm meant to go to the States for work in July, which looks highly unlikely at the moment. But I think just to support our local Australian, community and the local places too is going to be so important. And I think it's probably going to be the same in most countries. It's going to be the first thing that opens up, you would think, is domestic travel. We've still got a lot of closed borders here in Australia, Queensland and Western Australia and Tasmania. You still can't travel to those states without quarantining. So I think, once domestic travel starts going, it'd be great to just try to help the local economy. And for me, it's something, because of my work as well with postcards on China, it's something I'm actually passionate about, going out and seeing these local businesses and letting them tell me their story and me helping tell that to the public. It's such a fulfilling job to have.
Right.
Especially for me, growing up in regional New South Wales when I was a kid. I've seen it firsthand how important tourism is to those local communities.
Well said, Sammy. So everyone online, when you can, get out there, support those local businesses. In Australia, Accor, over 350 hotels, some great restaurants. So don't worry, we've got you covered. Nice little plug there, Sammy. Right, let's pivot. Let's go to tennis. Let's talk the journey. Now, you mentioned you are a country boy, right? You grew up in the country, Narrandera. Have I got that right?
I was born in Narrandera, not far from, if you do know New South Wales at all, or pull out your map, Google on your phone, it's in the middle of nowhere, about 5,000 people, not far from Wagga Wagga.
Okay.
A lot of good athletes have come out of that area, not me, but Riverina, New South Wales, and then travelled a lot around there as a kid. So my sister was born in Deniliquin, my brother was born in Corowa, where I sort of started playing tennis, went to primary school.
Yeah.
But I played every sport growing up. I think like you do when you grow up in country Australia, you sort of do a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
I played cricket, basketball and footy, and tennis was the last sport I probably picked up. Which is, when you look at everybody on tour and, a lot of professional athletes in the sport they end up in, 10's quite late to actually start that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you see kids out there now, sort of, they're starting to walk and they've got a tennis racket in their hand. So yeah, 10 sounds pretty old. But okay, so you started playing at 10. At what age did you say to yourself, I'm actually pretty good at tennis and I could make a career out of it?
Oh, I don't think I was ever that good, but no, I think the time came for me when I was about to turn 16, around that 16 years of age. I was playing footy. I was part of the Murray and Bushrangers, which is part of the TAC Cup, their sort of development pathway programs. And then I actually went to the nationals for tennis. The Australian Grass Court Championships was out in Mildura. And obviously for me, growing up in the area I did, it was all grass court tennis. It was the way I ended up developing my game when I moved forward as well. But I went to those championships and I made the final, lost in the final of the Australian Championship, sort of out of nowhere, really. I think it was quite unexpected. And in going to that tournament, I had to make a decision pretty much whether it was going to be tennis or footy, because there was a clash with my football and that event. And then making the final there, I was actually invited to move down to Melbourne and train alongside what was then the targeted athlete program with Tennis Australia. So I wasn't a part of the program, but I think they started to see that there was a little bit of something there, and I was able to come and train with the best kids in Australia at Melbourne Park. And I tell you, when you're a kid from, at that time I was living in Albury playing tennis, and you move to Melbourne and you're playing on the courts there at Melbourne Park for the first time, and it's day in, day out. It's very daunting, but also the level of professionalism that these kids or young players had, it was a huge step up for me.
I can imagine. And then, so you moved to Melbourne as a 16-year-old, but then at 16 you moved to London, right?
Yeah. So my parents moved down. I came down and lived for about 6 months with a family. My parents moved down. I ended up getting myself into the VIS. So I sort of developed pretty quickly from being outside the program to inside the supported program with Tennis Australia once I had all the best coaches and strength and conditioning and everyone around me. And I got my ranking high enough where I went to do a 3-month tour in Europe and finished at Junior Wimbledon. And then pretty much from there, I lived overseas ever since. I came back for the Australian summer. I got into the AIS, Australian Institute of Sport, that next year. And we actually ended up basing out of London. So here I was, a country that had moved to Melbourne. It was a huge shock. And then all of a sudden I've moved to London, which is, when you're not used to even traveling. I think I'd been on 2 overseas trips, one to the Philippines and Japan to play some junior tournaments, and one to Fiji. So I go to Europe, a huge change for me. It's completely out of my comfort zone, but I loved every minute of it.
And you would have obviously learned a lot of, life lessons when you were in London, probably being away from family. And what sort of things did you take from that time that would have set you up for what was going to be the grueling tour, which, to be fair, is pretty much the entire year and spans the entire globe?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the thing that people forget when you talk about being a professional tennis player. It looks so glamorous, but as an 18-year-old kid, really, moving overseas, you're playing futures events where the total prize money is $10,000 and your hotel bill a night is $150.
Yeah.
You learn very quickly how to manage money and budget, and as you get better, you're offered contracts and you have agents trying to sign you. And even though you're not at university, you're learning so many life skills that if you're smart about it, you learn a lot and set yourself up for what comes next, for sure. But as an 18-year-old kid, it's super daunting. I mean, there was only one time I remember when I was at that age that I had to call my dad and say, my prize money check will get banked in a week or so. I desperately need some money, help me, which was a phone call to have to make. Obviously, as a kid, you want your independence. And for me, with my career, it's the career I chose. I wanted to be able to support that. But yeah, I was lucky that my dad came through that time. And that was the only time I ever had to ask him for help, which was nice.
Dads are good. They always come through in those times. So well done, Mr. Groth. Now, 2011.
Yep.
Good tennis. You moved back to Melbourne. Why and what did you do?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty public at the time. I was married before to a former Australian player as well, and it wasn't working. I had a shoulder problem. I had shoulder surgery and had a real probably personal. It was a tough time for me in that, and I wanted to sort of get away from tennis and get away from everything that was that lifestyle. Came back to Melbourne. I was coaching at a local club. I was playing local footy at Vermont in Melbourne, which was unbelievable. The guys were amazing there, just took me on as one of their own. And at the same time, I met Britt. So it sort of ended up all for the best now that I'm sitting here talking to you. And obviously, we know you and you know us so well. As tough a time as it was for me then, and I didn't want to play tennis, it really allowed me to find myself. I talk about, how when I was 18, you move overseas, you find yourself. But I think when you go through something tough in your life or things that are tough in your life, you really start to learn a lot about yourself as well. And, Britt and I, we've been very open and honest, and she knew everything I was going through. And it was amazing because I want to play tennis, and she was a big part of the reason why I started to play again. And I'm forever thankful for that, because otherwise I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. And to obviously...
There you go. And I got to say, obviously, I'm going to talk about your comeback in a minute. It sounds like a big part of that. And, I have played Britt also in tennis, and I'm not going to tell you what I lost to her at. She can also play. But yeah, in 2012, you obviously came back to tennis, right? So that was a great step. And then later that year, in May, I think it was, you achieved something which today still stands as a record. And, you hold the world's fastest ever recorded serve in men's tennis, or tennis in general. Now, I have been asked so many questions, or I've been asked by so many people to ask these questions, I should say. I rephrase that to you. So
this is you're throwing else under the bus, not taking responsibility for your line of questioning. Is that what you're saying?
I'm just going to throw it to somebody else.
All right, perfect.
Right, so you need to tell us about the serve. You need to tell us how fast it was.
Yep.
Where it was, who you were playing, and please tell me they didn't return it.
Okay, so I was playing in Busan, South Korea.
Okay.
Against a guy named Vladimir Ignatic. He was a former world #1 junior from Belarus. It was 263 kilometers and ace down the tee.
Ace down the tee, 263.
Yeah.
So, okay, 263. I'm just doing the numbers on where I stack up. I think I've got something about 120 in me, so a bit slower.
At all, no.
263. I mean, that's super impressive, mate. I mean, congratulations. Still holds true today.
Yeah,
and
it's not...
look, I mean, if someone beats that, good luck to them. It won't be me. I'm going to ask you another question now about 2014 and 2015. Now, this was probably the peak of your career, right? The serve is the record, but it probably propelled you to 2014, 2015 when you had your best results in Grand Slams, both singles and doubles and mixed doubles. You represented Australia in the Davis Cup, where you guys made the semi-finals, which is an amazing achievement. And then that year, when I was reading your bio, for me, this stood out. And to be awarded the Newcomb Medal for the Outstanding Player of 2015 is just an amazing achievement, Sam. So first of all, congratulations on that. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that, and also that era I mentioned, that 14-15?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the record was nice to have. So, you know, it's something that I still look back at, and it's amazing to still have the serve record. But at the same time, in tennis, you're so judged on your ranking and your results in Grand Slams. And I really wanted to be inside that world's top 100. That's why I came back, you know, after my break in 2011. Coming back in 2012, I only played about 15 events. 2013, I started playing a full season and got myself to a point where I was back in Grand Slam qualies and, you know, back at a point where I could look to make a push. 2014 started where I got a wild card in Brisbane, the Brisbane International, and I made the quarterfinals. So it was sort of a really good jump for me to win matches at tour level. And then as 2014 progressed, you know, I lost last round qualies at the French Open to Simone Bolelli, who's been an amazing player for a long time. And then I actually had to play him again, last round qualies at Wimbledon. So we played each other back-to-back last round qualies, and Wimbledon's best of 5 sets. And I'd never qualified at a Grand Slam. So I'd had wildcards at the Australian Open in 2014, and back in 2009, I played main draw doubles, I played mixed doubles. But in terms of getting myself into a tournament, I'd never done French Open. I came so close. Yeah, and the thing was also in Paris, I went, just added in here, I went for a little run. I made the semi-finals of doubles with Andrei Golubev. So a partner that I'd never played with before, we signed up last minute for the draw, just trying to get in with both our rankings. And we ended up making the semi-finals there in Paris, which was unbelievable. But the confidence that gave me as well when I moved into the grass court season. I won a challenger event, and I was really starting to get things rolling, and qualified at Wimbledon, lost to Alexander Dolgopolov, who was, you know, top 10 in the world. But a week later in Newport, I made the semi-finals of that event in singles. And by making the semi-finals, I got myself in the top 100 for the first time. The cutoff for that week was also the last week to get in the main draw of the US Open.
Okay.
So I qualified at Wimbledon, making a semi-final. I now main draw at the US Open off my own bat. Albert Ramos Vinolas in the first round, the Spanish player in 3 sets. And that meant that I got to play Roger Federer Friday night, Arthur Ashe Stadium, centre court. And for a guy that's never been automatic entry into a Grand Slam, all of a sudden I'm playing in front of 20,000 people on the biggest stadium that we have in tennis.
Yeah, I've been lucky enough to go to the US Open and see Arthur Ashe Stadium. I mean, it's a coliseum nearly. It just goes vertical.
Yeah. Nerve-wracking. I remember I was in the tunnel, and you do the interview with Brad Gilbert. He asks you 2 questions about basically nothing. It's a bit of a waste of time. It's something for a little bit of TV. And I walked out, and the crowd goes nuts when you come out because there's 20,000 people. They make noise even if they don't know who you are. Then Roger Federer out, and they make a lot of noise for that guy no matter where you are in the world, I tell you. And
oh, yeah.
Thinking was, you know, geez, I'm a bit nervous at the coin toss, and I walked back, and I had a thing where in the warm-up, I'd like to always feed the ball in first to start the warm-up, just a little superstition. Yeah, and I went flying past Roger at shoulder height and almost hit the back wall. And I thought, oh, no, this is a disaster. But I ended up losing 6-4, 6-4, 6-4. But all of a sudden, I'm in the top 100. I went back to Australia the next year, made quarterfinals again in Brisbane, where I beat Leighton Hewitt, who was the defending champion. He'd beaten Federer the year before in the final. Yeah, that was huge for me to beat someone of Leighton's stature. You know, on that stage in Australia was something he didn't lose to Australians ever, and let alone in Australia. So that was a huge thing for me. He's obviously one of my good mates, and we played a lot of doubles together, especially in 2015 and onwards. But went to Melbourne, made 3rd round of the Australian Open, made 3rd round of Wimbledon, played Roger again there on centre court. And as you mentioned, you know, a few amazing memories in Davis Cup. But I think the big thing for me about winning the Newcombe medal was so much of it was based around that Davis Cup performance as well, and the role that you play within Australian tennis. So not just on the court, but also off. So for me to be awarded that medal at the end of that year, it was real recognition, and not just for me, but for everyone who was a part of my journey, from where I'd been, you know, sort of 3 or 4 years earlier, being at rock bottom to being really at the top of the game in this country. It was special.
Oh, fantastic. I mean, great journey, great stories. And, you know, to have those achievements after coming back from injury and the things you've discussed today, you know, congratulations to you. Now, you mentioned, obviously, the journey of tennis. It can be a lonely one, right? You're often, yes, you're representing Australia, but you're on your own. You might have a small team. You mentioned early days you had to call your dad for money. So sometimes you may not even have a coach on tour, let alone a hitting partner, right? So it can be tough. But in 2016, you got to do something which I think not many people can say that they've done, and that's represent Australia or their own country at the Olympic Games, and that was in Rio. I think there was a bit of a story as to how you qualified pretty last minute. So if you want to tell me a little bit about that, but also tell me about the Olympics. What was that like?
It was amazing. I think obviously you're Australian as well. We put such a importance on team events. You know, playing for your country. For me, it was always Davis Cup, but the opportunity to go to the Olympics was huge. And 2016 was always on my radar. And I mentioned that great year in 2015, but it actually ended early in October. I had foot surgery. I had to have a nerve removed from my right foot. So I have 3 toes in my right foot that I can't feel. If you hit them with a hammer right now, I wouldn't flinch. And so 2016 was sort of a struggle.
There?
No, she's not. Don't give her any ideas. But yeah, once 2016 started, I tried to rush back for the Australian Summer. Obviously, a huge event when you've had the year you've had before. You have commercial partnerships, a lot of things. And I came back really quickly in 2016. And even though I won a round at the Australian Open, I lost to Murray pretty badly in the second round. And I went to the French Open. I lost to Rafa first round. I went to, not great draws. Murray's made 5 finals in Melbourne. Rafa's won 12 French Opens. I turned up at Wimbledon. I lost to Nishikori first round, defending a third round. It was a real struggle. And the Olympics were a huge part of my planning for that year. I built everything to get myself in. And with the Olympics, my ranking was slowly dropping with these first round losses in these really big events. I was maintaining it through some other tournaments, but the big events is where you make most of your points. And the week that the Olympic cutoff came out was the first week I dropped outside automatic selection. So I was devastated. All of a sudden, I'm outside the cutoff. Playing in Atlanta the week before the Olympics were due to start, and I heard Stan Wawrinka had pulled out of the event. But you have to you can't nominate as an individual. It has to go through the Australian Olympic Committee, and it was 3 a.m. or 2 a.m. Australian time, and it was about 30 minutes before the cutoff that they had to accept my nomination. So I was frantically calling every single person in Australia I could to get on the phone and call and get my nomination in. I jumped on the flight the next day. I was in Rio. I walked in the opening ceremony, which, as an athlete in tennis, we're lucky. We have 4 Grand Slams a year, but for so many of these athletes, they plan their whole career to maybe run for 10 seconds. Games, and to be a part of that was incredible, and it's something that again that I really hold close, being able to go to an Olympic Games.
Very special moment for you. I can only imagine what an amazing experience it was, and that last minute drama, obviously it all paid. Fantastic.
Britt was in Atlanta with me, and she had to take clothes with me back to our apartment in Virginia. And it was interesting, but it's again something I would never trade. I mean, to be able to say that I'm Olympian forever, it's incredible.
I mean, you mentioned Davis Cup and how special that particular tournament is, and representing Australia with the likes of Leighton Hewitt, who just oozed passion whenever he represented Australia in that format, as did you and many other players before and after you guys. There's been a lot of innovation in tennis in the last few years. I think, Fast Four is an example. And then some of these new tournaments like the Laver Cup or even the ATP Cup, which was played for the first time this year in Australia. First of all, what do you think of those tournaments? Obviously, you didn't get to play the last 2 that I mentioned, Laver Cup and ATP Cup. You just retired. But do you think they're the future of tennis, or could they coexist with the Davis Cup?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a tough one, isn't it? Obviously, for me, Davis Cup was super important, but there's been huge changes with that in the last couple of years. I worked on the ATP Cup from a broadcast perspective this year. I thought it was incredible. Anytime you have players playing, obviously for points and prize money, but for the pride of their country, that's the biggest thing. The years that I played Davis Cup before they made the changes, there was still points involved. So even though you're playing country, there's still that, I guess, added incentive to be able to keep building your ranking while you're representing your country. I think personally, the ITF made a mistake. I haven't been backwards in saying that. I'm quite happy to come out and say it, that my Davis Cup weeks, because we play such an individual sport, to come together for 3 or 4 times a year for a week with the team and play for something bigger than yourself, it was always something really incredible. Can ATP Cup and Laver Cup and the Davis Cup in its current state all exist? Probably not. I don't think. The ATP Cup and the Davis Cup can come together and do something But I think there's a place for team events in these individual sports. I think it gives fans something else to cheer for as well. And in tennis we get the huge Roger or Rafa or Novak fans, but all of a sudden you put them in a team alongside someone else, and the fans start to cheer for them, or everyone starts to cheer for Australia or Serbia, and I think that's huge. And I think it's something that's been missing in tennis. And I think as we eventually lose those sort of top three guys, and Murray's obviously struggling a little bit with injury, Stan Wawrinka, they've sort of been the five guys on the men's side. And then if you look at the women's with Serena and Sharapova sort of all reaching the end of their side, it's now to keep fans engaged, to find more of those team sort of style events. I think so.
Okay. I think that's a good comment. And I mean, I love the Davis Cup. I grew up obviously watching it and supporting Australia. And for me, it's one of those events you look forward to watching. But the other two events were also great as well. Obviously, the time zone was great for Labour Cup. But
I just think it was when you saw the Davis Cup, the finals in Spain last year, Australia's playing Colombia on an away court with 30 people in the stands. Like, that for me wasn't Davis Cup. Davis Cup was, Leighton and I playing the Murray brothers in Glasgow with 10,000, the Barmy Army yelling at me for 5 hours. That was Davis Cup, that passion, and whether it was home or away. And you just don't get that, I don't think, with taking all the teams to a single venue so far away.
Well, look, let's see what happens. Hopefully we get some tennis this year. We'll come back to that. But thanks for sharing on that. I'm going to ask you now around about your career and your greatest rivalry, right? So who would you say was the person that you feared most when entering a tournament? You were like, please don't let me draw them. Please don't let me draw them. And then what would be your fondest memory on court?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because obviously in tennis you're drawing someone different all the time. It's not like football where you've got a guaranteed matchup. Every season you're going to play the same team twice, or team from the same city. We look at rivalries in tennis, and the top guys, they play each other all the time because they're always reaching the back end of events. For me, the worst draw I ever got was Rafael Nadal at the French Open. That's the guy you don't. If there's one tournament to play one guy, Novak in Australia, unbelievably tough. I mean, we sit there and watched him demolish Rafael Nadal last year in the final. A silly amount of time, but I think when you draw Rafa at the French, you can start packing your bags pretty quickly.
I mean, that to me would just be the worst draw. If you see his name come up against yours, you'd be looking at flights. But it just interestingly, I'm going to ask you a question. You answer it seriously, sincerely, and truthfully, please.
Yeah.
How long was the match with Rafa?
I think it was like an hour and 14 minutes. Which is best of 3 sets. Well, sorry, I'll say best of 5 sets. It was 3 sets, 6-1, 6-1, 6-1 on clay. So,
you took 3 games.
And I took a set off Roger at Wimbledon on grass on centre court, but playing Rafa on clay is a completely different scenario.
Oh, I can only imagine. So let's turn then to your fondest memory. You mentioned playing Roger Federer, and I know that you took a set off him on centre court. I happened to be at Wimbledon that year. I was on court 2 whilst you were playing, sitting there thinking, why am I not on centre court? Because I didn't have any money, and just wishing that you did well. But you did. You lost, but in 4 sets to the great Roger Federer, where centre court at Wimbledon is his home.
Yeah, I mean, obviously amazing playing Roger. I mean, arguably the greatest of all time when you look at what he's done for our sport. But to be on that court, and I think it was, for me, it was all about the process and that journey as well. To be playing on centre court at Wimbledon, it's what you dream about when you're a kid, especially here in Australia. It's the tournament you get up and watch in the middle of the night. Yeah, it's the one for us here. We've, as Australians, always had this unbelievable history there. But some of my best memories are from playing Davis Cup as well. I mean, playing in Darwin against Kazakhstan in the quarterfinals, we're 2-0 down, and Leighton and I go out and win the doubles, and I win the 4th rubber in singles. And I've never been so nervous watching someone play a 5th rubber of anything as Leighton trying to get us over the line and get us into the semi-finals. But also just because of that nerves, it's not just for yourself, and you're playing for the country and the bench and the people sitting there. I think that's some of my best memories too. And luckily for me, that memory at Wimbledon against Roger and then Davis Cup, they were back-to-back weeks. So it was such an incredible time.
Oh, it's brilliant, Sammy. Brilliant memories. I'm going to ask you, did you have a favourite tournament outside of Grand Slams and Davis Cup that you were like, I've got to qualify, you're booking flights because you're confident you're going to get in? Was there one tournament that you were just like, that's it, that's the one I have to play?
Yeah, I mean Newport, Rhode Island for me. So in the US, every year they induct the Hall of Fame nominees at the end of the event. It's a real throwback. So it's old school grass, dodgy, perfect for me. No, it doesn't bounce. Serve volley are coming in, but the town really. It's not a big place, but it's incredible. On the marina there, the yachts coming in. I think they've had the America's Cup there, and yeah, it's an amazing place. But I think just also because of the history. So every year you'll have two or three of the greatest players coming into the event and being inducted into that Hall of Fame. Yeah, for me that was always the event that I wanted to play no matter what.
Okay. I got to say, I do enjoy watching that one on TV. But yeah, never been to that one, but it sounds,
trip there special.
So, with tennis obviously in hiatus, suspended since obviously March, the WTA and ATP at the very last minute with Indian Wells did the cancellation, and we haven't had another tennis ball hit since in a professional environment, to my knowledge. When do you think we're going to see tennis return in any shape or form? Do you have any crystal ball it?
Incredible, isn't it? I mean, we covered Davis Cup in Adelaide. The Australian guys left to go over to Indian Wells. I actually had a role with the Grand Prix here in Melbourne as an ambassador. We were doing all the pre-race stuff. We were on the grounds the day that they cancelled all sport here in Australia.
Yeah.
Then the guys that flew to Indian Wells, they got cancelled there the next day. And, I can't see us playing tennis this year, unfortunately. I just think, we both work in an industry that requires travel, and so many people watching this that follow this account, I'm sure, are travelers. And we know if we all can't travel, and tennis is a sport that's so global with the amount of play. I think it's 42 countries are represented in the top 100 men's and women's on the ATP and WTA tours. It's something like that, 40-odd countries. To be able to bring players together and then city hop week to week and then country hop after 4 weeks, I just don't see how, with the way everything is in the world right now, that's going to be possible. Hopefully we can get things going quickly and we can get the Australian summer up and going. We're lucky here in Australia that we, as isolated as we are from the world, sometimes it plays in our favour. We have closed borders. It's the summertime. We have the facilities to be able to bring players down and quarantine possibly here if that's still a requirement early. And then maybe it starts fresh next year. But I hope we get it back as soon as possible.
Oh, me too. Me too. I'm just craving some live sport, and whether that's tennis or rugby or whatever, it could be 10-pin bowling. Anything live would be great at this point in time. Now, you mentioned obviously a couple of these, legends of the game who are still playing, but into the twilight of their career. Do you have any, thoughts around juniors coming through to keep an eye on both the men's and the women's side?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been so hard to break through on both sides, really. I mean, Serena's been so dominant on the women's side. Obviously, her record speaks for itself. And then on the men's side, you had 3 guys who have won almost 60 Grand Slams between them. When you it's 15 years of tournaments that won between the 4 of them. It's quite remarkable that this is the era that we've been in. We've seen people try to challenge on the men's side and come close and not quite get there. Obviously, Dominic Thiem's the latest one, making the Open final. Guys like Nishikori, Raonic and Dimitrov probably didn't quite do it. They were the generation before this next one of Thiem and Zverev and Tsitsipas. And the only thing that's working for those guys is the other guys are getting older. So Murray, Novak and Roger and Rafa, at some point, they've got to stop. When that is, who knows? I think we've seen a little bit more of a breakthrough on the women's side, obviously with Barty and with Andreescu and with Osaka. They're starting to get that fresh wave of new faces winning the biggest events. But it's always the question, isn't it, on the ATP side, is who's going to be the first one to sort of break through? We saw Del Potro get close. I mean, he won a US Open, but his knees have just not allowed him to play, his wrists and his knees.
Yes. And Wawrinka got a few in there as well. And
and we know Cilic was close, but just no one able to really topple the mantle and get consistently to that top level. There's been 5 guys. It's been 3 guys, and then you add in sort of Murray and Wawrinka within that. But yeah, it's incredible to think it's an amazing era that we've had in tennis. I don't think you'll ever see one like it. I mean, we thought Sampras Agassi was amazing, which it was. And we look at Connors and McEnroe and I think sometimes you forget because of how good Roger and Rafa and Novak are now that they've always been champions, but there's never been ones that have been as dominant as this.
Sure. So, okay, that's a great segue to my next question, actually, and that is the question about the GOAT, right? So you've got Roger Federer, and he's a sprightly 39 in not too long from now, but holding 20 Grand Slams. You've got Rafa, 4 years his junior, sitting on 19, 12 French Opens, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Is that right? 12 or but 19 Grand Slams. And then slightly younger again is Novak Djokovic with 17 and currently the Australian Open champion. And of course, he's sitting on a 21 winning streak before tennis stopped, right? So, I mean, he was in insane form. Now, French Open would have been next. Rafa doesn't really ever lose there, so he could have equaled Roger at that point. But I'm going to ask you your thoughts, right? And I'm not going to hold you to it, but I'm just interested in what you think. When the dust settles, who will be the greatest Grand Slam champion and what will their numbers be?
Yeah, I mean, it's a question that's always asked, isn't it? I mean, it's the one that everyone argues about. You have Roger fans, you have Rafa fans. I don't think Novak's, and it's unpopular when you say this with Novak fans, but I don't think he's ever been as popular as the other two. But I think he's going to be the one that eventually holds that record. Just because he's a little bit younger, he's so close and he's so dominant at the moment. And I don't think that next wave is quite ready to topple him yet. Okay. I think Roger's probably done the most for the sport when you look at a player who's helped grow it, and his record's incredible. It's amazing to think that when he broke Pete Sampras's record and now he has 20 Grand Slams, that might not be the record at the end. Yeah. It's ridiculous to think. I mean, I don't think that he wins anymore. I think his last chance was probably at Wimbledon. People say maybe the break does him good with his body. Well, problem is the break does him maybe good and his body feels better, but he's still going to be 39 when tennis comes back at its earliest. We all know as we get older, everything hurts a little bit more when you get out of bed in the morning. And even though you do everything you possibly do and you'll have the best team around him, you're still getting older. And there's still younger guys coming through and the game's so physical. How does Nadal come back after all of that? I think Novak, he has some interesting views on some things. I know we've all seen that, but he does take care of his body unbelievably well.
Yeah, he does.
He holds up the way he moves and,
he's a rough.
We've seen it, and you and I have seen it so close firsthand in Australia. Again, against Dominic Thiem, he wasn't at his best physically, but found a way to win. The year before, dismantled Nadal. I mean, it was some incredible. Seeing moving like that, you just think, how are these younger guys going to beat him? Because they've still got huge holes in their game, and he doesn't.
Yeah.
The number. How much longer does he play? We don't probably play this year. He maybe wins 2 or 3 next year and gets to that 20 mark. Maybe in 2, 23. It just depends. It depends how hungry he is too. And I think that's what people forget, that, we think Roger playing at 38 is going to be the normal. But the reality is, so many people have retired before this. Andy Roddick retired at 28 years of age. He was world and won.
Oh, no, Andy Roddick. Yes, you're right. Sorry, I thought you said Andy Murray for a minute. Because he retired and then he came back out.
Yeah, but even Murray right now, I mean, he's 32 and, we might not see him again, depending on his hip. It's struggling. I hope, I'm not saying that he won't, but, these guys, what they're doing are the outliers. They're not the normal.
Yeah, right. I mean, I could talk to you for another few hours on tennis, but I'm cognizant of the time. So, look, I'm going to pivot again. Let's talk about mental and physical strength. So can you give the viewers some tips, Sam Groth, about how to keep cool and focused during an intense tennis match? Now, you've had some short ones, 1 hour, 12 minutes against Nadal on centre court at the French Open. That's still pretty good going. And no doubt you've had some long matches, 5-setters that have gone close to the 5-hour mark. But how what sort of tips can you give to the guys online about staying cool and staying focused when you're in a pressure situation?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, isn't it? When you're playing tennis and you're on one of these big courts, there's nowhere to hide, really. You've got the crowd all looking at you. You can't play for time. You've got to stay out there until the last ball's hit. For me, I always felt the best on court when I'd done the preparation. Like anything, you've done the preparation for this interview, you go away and do your research. I do the same now when I do my TV stuff, or I feel like you always feel most under pressure when you haven't prepared properly.
Yeah.
And it's and I'm not as good at it with obviously with my body now, but when I was playing, it would start from the moment you got up every day. To be flexibility, it'd be the way you ate, how much you slept, all the very cliche things. Sorry,
there's a science to it.
Yeah, but all the cliche things that you think you should do and everyone says, but if if you've done all of those things, that when you walk out on court, that anxiety goes away because you belong there, you've done the work and you haven't left little things. Your rackets are strung and your rackets are gripped and they're all lined up. And it's when you haven't done something quite right that you start to think, well, I didn't do that, and that's the reason that I'm nervous now, because what if that affects my performance? And I think it's cliche to say it, but at the same time it's not, because and it's probably one of the reasons I retired, because I lost the will to do those little things and it started to affect my performance, and I didn't want that to happen. Sure. If I had passion to do everything I needed to do, then I wanted to find something else that I was passionate about, and that's why I retired, and that's why I went into working in the media, because it is something that I'm passionate about now.
No, definitely. We're going to come to media in a minute, but last question around injuries, right? And you mentioned a couple of those injuries that you've had to come back from over the years. What sort of preparation did you have to do physically and mentally to be able to come back from an injury when that tour that you're on is so grueling? It's literally 365 nearly, that tour. How long were you out for your injury, and what did you do to get back?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. You talk about it, you probably get December off, and that's going to be the time that you train to prepare for a Grand Slam 2 weeks into the first month of the year in the Australian Open. So there's not a lot of break, especially when you're not one of the top three guys where they can play 18 tournaments a year. You're probably playing 30 weeks and, a few weeks off in between that to practice and train. And, I had foot surgery. So I mentioned I had all the nerves cut out of my foot. I've had both shoulders done. I've had my right knee cleaned out. And that doesn't include any of the little soft tissue things that happen over the years. But, it's like anything else. You got to do everything you can to prevent those. That's the biggest thing. I think I always came back pretty well from injury because I'd prepared pretty well beforehand. So it never took me quite as long. But I think also not to rush back. I think that was always the hard thing, because your ranking starts to drop and you want to play again. And that was when I made my mistake with my foot. I rushed back. I didn't get my foot right, and it affected my performance. And that was probably the injury that really derailed me once I couldn't move as well. Obviously, I'm a big guy. My game sort of struggled. But, yeah, it's hard. I mean, in tennis, you're a sole trader. You're not part of a team. You're not being paid if you're not on the court playing and making prize money. So you see a lot of rush back out there and get things done quickly. And, yeah, I mean, it's tough.
Well, look, thank you for those words. I think, the mental struggles that everyone has on a daily basis, can probably relate to that, even though you're playing an intense professional sport. But I appreciate those words. So thank you, Sammy. Now, look, we're getting close on time, so I'm going to quickly just change the topic again. Let's talk a little bit about life after tennis for you and a bit of travel. So, you're doing some great work with commentating with Channel 9 on the tennis, both domestically and internationally. You've got a show where you're a host for a show on Channel 9 called Postcards. But, of course, tennis is on hiatus. There's not really much you can do in travel at the moment because everything's closed. So what are you missing most about those two gigs?
Yeah, I mean, I love traveling. I do miss meeting people. So the thing with Postcards, it's a domestic travel show here in Victoria, but it's people's chance to tell us about what they've created. Obviously I sit here and talk about tennis and how important that journey was and how much I loved it and, how proud I am to do these little things. But when you go to someone's restaurant or their winery or their hotel and they've created their own little piece of themselves in what they've done, I think I love hearing those stories. I miss sport. I mean, I miss tennis. I miss footy. the buzz that those events give you. I mean, as much as I don't love playing tennis anymore, I love still working within the sport and watching the best in the world do what they do, and being able to try to bring a little bit of my insights into people, or to people when they watch that.
Yeah.
Give them a little bit more than what they're seeing just without the balls being hit. But, for Britt and I, we miss getting away. I mean, we quickly ducked up to Bali for a week. We had a villa that we bought in a charity auction about a year ago, right before we got locked down. Obviously, we visited you up in Singapore. I played tennis with you and your friends up there on the roof.
By the way, the great Nick Bauer.
which was great fun, and just those little things, to go and experience different cultures. And I was lucky. I've been to some terrible places. I've had to smuggle money in my shoes out of Uzbekistan to get my prize money out of the country, but I've also been to some really incredible places, and that's one of the things that hopefully when all this is over, we can all get out and experience some of those things. And if you haven't experienced them, there's so much out there in the world.
No, definitely. Well said. Now, you are, though, doing a lot of things still. You've got a great show called The Greatest, if I'm not mistaken, on Wyborder Sports. You're co-hosting with another ex-professional tennis player, the great Todd Woodbridge. Great body. So tell us a little bit about that show. And I'm interested, what's Todd like to work with?
Todd's great to work with. He's not worried about a younger guy coming in and taking his job. No, he helps me out a lot. He's been a guy that I've been able to lean on. Obviously, when I did play tennis, his last ever tournament was the 2005 Wimbledon, and that was the year I made the finals of the doubles there in juniors, and he helped me every day, even though he was about to retire. So we've had a great relationship for a long time, and it's the same now with the media stuff. He's been doing it, pretty much ever since he retired. And we've been showing old Australian Open matches. On a Saturday afternoon. We're going to get some live sport back soon, though. So I think we might be done with that now. Okay. Opportunity to work alongside Todd and to, again, bring some of those. And it's great, I think, to look back at the Australian Open over the years. I think you very much forget some of the historical matches that play. I tell you, the old green courts look very, very strong.
Yeah, when back, they're so different, right?
It's bizarre watching it. But it's also good to see some of the old school tennis, a little bit faster, a little bit more net play. I'd like bit more of that coming back.
All right. Good memories. I'm going to ask you one final question, Sammy, because I know you've probably got to cook some dinner with Britt. If there was one place in the world you could be right now, there were no restrictions, so you've got a blank sheet of paper, where would you be?
I think we'd probably go back on safari. We were so lucky for our honeymoon. We went to northern South Africa, in Madikwe, the game reserve. Up there, we stayed for 5 nights. It was incredible to be so close to animals in their habitat. I don't think I could ever go to a zoo again. I'd find it really hard after seeing how animals live in the wild compared to even if a zoo tells you their enclosures are amazing. Very hard, but it's something that we want to do. It's another bucket list item for us to be able to go back there, and hopefully eventually we'll have a family of our own, and when the kids are old enough to appreciate going to a place like that, I think it's definitely one of the first places we'll be lining up to go to.
Brilliant. Well, let's hope social distancing is well and truly gone by then, and the elephants and the rhinos don't have to be so far apart. Sorry, that's my at poor humour. So listen, I have to thank you, Sammy. You've been a great person to have a chat with tonight. I hope the guys online have got a lot of insights from you and enjoyed a little bit of your journey. It's been a great one. So thank you so much. And to everyone who's joined today and tonight, thanks so much for taking your time to be here with All at Home. Sammy, any final words from you, tips, observations, words of advice?
No, I mean, it's been great to be able to catch up with you. Obviously, we were an hour in. We could have done this all night, I think, once we got through our first little technical hiccups. There's so much more to unpack. Hopefully people, if they haven't caught it, they're going back and watching this. Eventually, if you have any questions about tennis or my travels or something that we haven't been able to touch on, don't hesitate to reach out. There's plenty of free time right now. Maybe you have a question about tennis, or maybe you have a question about a local restaurant here in Melbourne. I've got lots of mates who'd appreciate the support as they all try to open up their doors, or they're doing takeaway again. And I just want to say thanks to everyone for tuning in, and hopefully, of course, we're talking about, obviously, on an Accord channel here, we can all get back out and stay in some of your lovely places again, and hopefully I can get up there to see you in Singapore sometime soon.
Definitely. Thanks, mate. And thanks for the plug. So look, guys, just to close, all at home, some great digital experience. I really hope you've enjoyed tonight. This will be recorded and you can watch it back if you feel the need to. Sammy, you've been amazing. Thank you. Guys, I'm Michael Parsons.